Hi. In this short little video, I'll take you through the next task up in literature, which is the views of a text task on Mrs. Dalloway, and we'll look at the task itself and the criteria for the assessment. This is outcome 3, where you're asked to evaluate views of a text and make comparisons with your own interpretation. So keep in mind that two-part nature to the task, evaluating the viewpoint of the reviewer in this case, and also bringing your own interpretation and viewpoint to the table. At MLC this year, the task will be around evaluating Mrs. Dalloway, and you should bring to this task a review that you've been thinking about from a bundle which will give you to think about. I suggest one long review or two of the shorter ones is okay. Keeping in mind your essay should demonstrate an understanding of some theoretical concepts and key concepts here. So theoretical perspectives might be to do with perhaps a feminist review or a Freudian review or a socialist review, for example, talking about the kind of perspectives the reviewer's brought, and also the values and assumptions that are underpinning those viewpoints. In other words, what is it there that their views and values, a bit like the Porter task or the Rich task we just did. What are the views and values of the actual reviewer in this case? And then evaluating the viewpoints with reference to your own, detail and own viewpoint in mind. I'll get to that when we get to the criteria in a sec. So one lesson for this, 20 marks. It's about half the length and half the, obviously worth half the amount of the first two SACs we've done. We're suggesting around 800 words, but to be honest, it'll be what you can write reasonably in a lesson. Don't try to write too much. Don't overwrite it. Probably is a good advice to think about for this one. As far as the assessment criteria are concerned, quickly looking from left to right with a very high, which are the ones we should be looking at in these boxes. First one, and they're all worth 4 marks each, so there's 5 of them, so there's 20 marks total. Pretty simple. The first one's to do with understanding of the theoretical perspectives and the key concepts and terms in the review. So it's talking about the concepts and the theoretical perspectives of the review. Think of it a bit like you did with the context in the last SAC, that kind of background, that kind of level of detail. You don't need to be an expert on psychoanalysis to understand the basic concepts and that perspective and how that might influence a reviewer. The best ones will have highly developed understanding. Secondly, exploring the values and assumptions, and this is a bit like that views and values task again. What values underlie the viewpoints that this reviewer has brought to the text? Think back to what Auden said in our Eden task right at the start of the year. Every reviewer, every reader, every writer brings something to the table themselves in terms of their own viewpoints and value systems. The best ones here will be comprehensive, exploring them comprehensively. And then evaluating the viewpoints, and this is where your own viewpoint might come in, probably should come in. Evaluating the viewpoint in terms of, is this how I see it? How does this correspond to how I see it? And being able to kind of really analyze that viewpoint. And then below that, textual evidence. Again, this is really evidence from keep in mind both the review needs to be quoted and quoting from Mrs. Dalloway too. So when you're thinking about the kind of textual evidence you're using here, the textual evidence that you'll use will come from both the review and Mrs. Dalloway herself. And finally, the one we always see, expression and development of ideas. Well written, well organized, coherent, fluent kind of writing, which is highly expressive and will always be something we want to see. And that's the final 4 marks. So 5 criteria, 4 marks, a shorter SAC this time, an interesting opportunity for you to test your ideas against an idea from one of the reviewers.